Right now, the Democrats, they are taking advantage of the fact that President Trump declared a national emergency to fund a border wall. In 2020, the Supreme Court, by a 5-4 vote, permitted construction to move forward while litigation proceeded. And Democrats are now saying that because Trump opened that door, again, I at the time pointed out that using national emergency declarations to do things you can't get through Congress is bad policy and opens the door to Democrats doing the same. Senator Jeff Merkley is saying that Trump's case can now be seen as a test run for Biden to declare a climate emergency, even though the court really never reached a final ruling on emergency powers. Jean Sue, a senior attorney for the Center for Biological Diversity involved in litigating the case against Trump, supports Biden declaring a climate emergency. So the case for Trump doing it is that the Democrats were going to do it anyway. And so both sides, I guess, don't have to pay any attention to the rules. And well, Joe Biden's climate advisor, Gina McCarthy, she really lets the cat out of the bag here. She says, you know what? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to regulate, and then we're going to regulate, and then we're going to regulate some more. And again, most Americans are looking at the price of gas right now. They're looking at the price of goods at stores. They're looking at all of their inflated bills, and they're thinking, are you out of your damned minds? But apparently they are. Joe Biden's going for it.
EPA has every ability in the world to continue to regulate in a way that recognizes the pollution that's associated with the burning of fossil fuels and that advances the opportunities for clean energy. So we are still going to regulate, and we're going to regulate strong. And part of the efforts moving forward will be to make sure that we expedite the process of regulation.
More regulation. That's exactly what Americans are clamoring for, more regulation. Now, listen, the reason that Joe Biden is doing this is because what Joe Biden has to fear, so long as he doesn't retire, is the possibility of a primary challenge. What he wants to do is demonstrate to his Democratic voters, again, his fealty to their principles, even if he can't actually achieve the goals that he is setting here. But all this means is really making the American people suffer so that he can get his primary voters back on board, because he certainly doesn't have the broad spectrum of Americans behind him. Pete Buttigieg, widely seen by echo chamber Democrats as a possible presidential candidate thanks to his sterling record as the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, where he could not fill potholes. But hey, he's gay. He's the Secretary of Transportation. He says the big problem right now is people are dying from the heat.
Yes, we can and must act to make sure that we reverse the worst effects of climate change. Look, some of it's upon us right now. This is not a question about whether it's going to happen or whether it's not going to happen. It's a question of
they're going to keep rising.
It's a question of how many lives and how many livelihoods are going to be destroyed by allowing the worst effects of climate change to happen.
Right now, people are
I've never known the United States. I've never known the United States
for something that may or may not happen by 2030.
They're dying from the heat because of a climate-related extreme weather.
But we're not going to cut emissions until 2030. In the meantime, they need energy to cool their homes and to heat their homes.
By the way, this is CNBC host Joe Kernan just destroying Buttigieg on this emergency declaration. So you hear Buttigieg saying, what if we just regulate so that in 100 years the climate is slightly less hot than it otherwise would be? And Joe Kernan's like, it's hot right now. And you know what's a way that we deal with it being hot right now is by turning on our air conditioner. You know what we need in order to actually turn on our air conditioner? Energy. You know where that energy comes from? All the things that you're trying to regulate, you idiot. So here is CNBC host Joe Kernan really woodshedding Buttigieg right here.
If the president declares a climate emergency, executive order, we are going to stop oil and gas drilling in the outer continental shelf. We're going to do all kinds of things that will limit production of hydrocarbons at this time, with the idea that by 2030, everyone else is going to be along with us, and that will somehow, you think we're going to be able to change the weather the climate between now and 2030 with what China?
Well, we've changed the climate between 2010 and now, and not in a good way.
Okay, but that's Kernan's point is, okay, now it's really hot. And you're telling people that if they want people to be slightly less hot, again, I always say slightly less hot than they otherwise would be because the climate is already going to continue to warm. It's not as though we just stop the climate dead in its tracks if we cut off carbon emissions right now. That's not the way that any of this works. Because here's the reality when it comes to climate change. And again, this gets people labeled a climate denier because the label climate denier is basically just applied to anyone who doesn't go along with the left-wing agenda. If I say global warming is happening, climate change is happening, because by most available data, it is. If I say that is largely human-generated, because by most available data, it is. If I say that human beings are really bad at mitigation but very good at adaptation, and that the thing that human beings should be focused on is how to protect ourselves from climate change as we develop technological solutions for climate change that are not wind and solar. If I say that sort of stuff, then they say you're a climate denier, despite the fact that the policies that I'm proposing actually help human beings. More air conditioning is a good thing. More economic prosperity is a good thing. More homes that are capable of barring extreme weather events. Those are good things. And yet for the left, they're bad things. If you say those things, then you are insufficiently dedicated to the proposition that climate change must be ended by ceasing the use of fossil fuels. My proposition is that you're much better off using fossil fuels to keep people from dying today while you develop the technological solutions that are going to replace fossil fuels in the mid to long term. The left's proposition is we should do a bunch of stuff that makes no sense and isn't going to help anything over the course of the next 100 years, really. But at least you will have shown that you care about climate change. Because here's the thing, folks, more people die every year of cold than they do of heat. I know the media like to cover the really hot summers because it's hot during the summer. Again, it will never cease to be a source of bewilderment to me that every single summer we're supposed to cover the summer as though it's a piece of news. Wow, it's amazing. Wow, it got really hot this summer. Yes, it is slightly hotter this summer than it was last summer. It may be slightly hotter the summer after that. But that does not mean that the solution to that is to bar people from using the resources they have at their disposal to survive. More people die from cold than hot every year. I know that's a weird stat that people don't like to pay attention to, but that's been true pretty much every year that we have a record for it. Okay, beyond that, the heat waves in the past killed far more people. The reason is not because it was cooler then, or because it was hotter then, per se. The reason that they used to kill a lot more people is because we didn't know how to deal with it very well. The Washington Post, in fact, has a piece today titled "The U.S. is Sweltering. The heat wave of 1936 was far deadlier." Quote, abandoned vehicles sinking into scorching hot orange silt, fields of dying crops, ghost towns cowering under black clouds of dust. The killer U.S. heat wave of 1936 spread as far north as Canada, led to the heat-related deaths of an estimated 5,000 people, sent thermometers to a record 121 degrees Fahrenheit in Steele, North Dakota, and made that July the warmest month ever recorded in the United States. In much of the central United States, summer of 1936 was even hotter than it is today. At their peak, temperatures in North Dakota were warmer than midsummer Death Valley and hot enough to cook rare steak in the street. Few residents struggling in those temperatures would have been able to afford such a meal. The heat wave struck during the Great Depression, 6 years into a sustained period of crop failure and economic hardship. The North American heat wave of 1936 followed one of the coldest recorded winters in the same exact area. In North Dakota, February temperatures at Devil's Lake plunged to minus 21 degrees. Although greenhouse gases have warmed the world's oceans since the 1830s, and global warming concerns were raised as early as 1896, the pronounced swing in temperatures in 1936 isn't generally considered to be part of human-driven climate change. Now, again, one of the inconvenient facts about climate change is that you do have years where it was hotter than it is today, and it had nothing to do with human emissions. A simple fact is there have been times in the Earth's history where it's been way hotter than it was today and way cooler than it is today. Okay, but according to the Washington Post, as documented in 1936 North American heat wave, the history of America's deadly heat wave during the Dust Bowl and Great Depression, temperatures began to rise rapidly in March, with rainfall becoming scarce. By June, a drought was consuming the Northeast. Soon, the West and the South were experiencing the same conditions. We had fans, recalled 88-year-old Columbus resident Louis Sager in 2016. The temperature had hit 103 degrees for 7 consecutive days. Air conditioning was available only in a few stores and theaters. Okay, and herein lies the rub, okay? 5,000 heat-related deaths have been reported across America during that 1936 heat wave. Today, heat remains America's deadliest weather killer, causing more fatalities in an average year than tornadoes, hurricanes, or flooding. That's not even really true. Really cold causes more deaths year on year than does heat. But the simple fact of the matter is that human beings have gotten way better at dealing with the heat. I mean, it really is amazing. Their conclusion here is, quote, if the conditions of the 1936 heat wave were to take place now, the result would likely be far more severe. Should this ocean warming reoccur in exactly the same constellation, according to one expert, because of climate change, it's likely the temperature impacts would be even more devastating, and those old records may be surpassed. Right, but 5,000 people wouldn't die. You know why? Because everybody has air conditioning now, because we're way wealthier. The growth of human wealth and productivity is the great barrier against climate-related deaths. This is why to deprive human beings of GDP growth, particularly in areas that are vulnerable, in order to lower the temperature, is a fool's errand. You're better off, depending on the amount of temperature increase that we are talking about. And Nobel Prize in Economics winner William Nordhaus says that that's probably 2 degrees Celsius. Depending on the amount of increase in temperature you're talking about, you're probably better off allowing that temperature increase to occur if the alternative is you shut down all industry, if the alternative is you shut down people's ability to actually protect themselves against the climate. The battle for the culture is heating up. We here at the Daily Wire are making some big moves. So be sure to like, subscribe, ring that bell, because you're not going to want to miss a single moment.